Okay, this is seriously irritating me because I was not planning on doing this video, but Etsy has just announced a policy clarification, and I want to see what we need to do about this. There's really nothing at this point that we need to do. You might want to go into your listings to look at what this looks like in your listings, because in the listing manager, there is a change. But let's go into the actual announcement and see what this is all about. First of all, this is, it's a video that they put out. They say that there is no change in Etsy policy as far as being able to sell specific things. They're not changing what can be sold on Etsy. Okay. But what they want to do is to clarify a little bit about the source of the item. And I think that they are really trying to lean into the handmade thing and to tell people that this is a handmade platform, even though we know it hasn't been for quite some time. Yeah, there are handmade things on the platform. I make all of my products. Well, not all of them. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. But they're either handmade or it's a supply or it's vintage. And those are the three core categories that can still be sold on Etsy. They're not opening this up to drop shipping. They're not opening it up to people who are reselling things that are not vintage, whatever the situation is. They're not changing that. They're changing how they are defining this. So this says the new creativity standards. Okay. All items on Etsy must be either made by a seller, designed by a seller, sourced by a seller, or handpicked by a seller. Okay, now made by a seller is clear, you made it, right? Designed by a seller means it's print on demand. You designed it, someone else is making it. Sourced by a seller would be for party supplies or supplies in general, as Josh talked about in the video that is up at the top of this page. I'll put the link to this in the description of this video. You can read the whole article and watch the video. Or handpicked by a seller is for vintage. So if you have picked something, it is vintage, you are selling it, that's handpicked by a seller. This does not mean that you can go and buy things off of Alibaba and resell it and say that you handpicked it. That still violates Etsy's policy. So don't freak out and think they're opening it up to that. The problem is going to be in the administration of this, not in the policy itself. Okay. Starting today, and I'm reading down here, there will be a new item detail on listing pages labeled as one of the following: made by shop name, designed by shop name, sourced by shop name, and handpicked by shop name. And I do want to show you, I'm going to be hopping back and forth here because I just, I wasn't planning on doing this video, but I did find some examples of this. And I want to show you in my shop, because most of the things that I sell are handmade. I make everything that I sell. Most of the time, there are some supplies. Okay, so let's share the screen over here. This is what it looks like on the listing itself. These are some butterflies that I print these out. I cut them out myself. I put them in the package. I make it myself. This says made by a cake to remember. Okay. In the back end of this, it says who made this, like in the listing manager, who made it? I did, because I did. I make it, I cut it out, I send them to people. All right. So that's the example of that. But if it's a supply, it says, I think, sourced by, and I want to show you that if this is what it looks like when it says a supply. So these are butterflies that I bought on Amazon to see what my competition was selling, because they're all selling stuff that they say they made by hand. They are lying. Okay. A lot of people, even in my category, are buying things and reselling them and say that they made them by hand. Now, if you put that it's a supply, it's legal on Etsy because it's not claiming that you made it. And that's what I did on here, just to get rid of them. But see, it's a strategic thing. Okay. It's a little salty. I'm like very clear in here that I bought these from a reseller. Let's see. These are sourced from an overseas supplier. They're not made in the US. I just did that kind of as a, hey, competition. I hope people read the description on mine and see that yours are exactly the same thing and you're not really making them yourself, because everybody sells them on Etsy now. And what this says on this is sourced by a cake to remember, right? But because in the description of this, I do not say that I make it. Okay, I am telling the truth. This is the problem with this policy. And, this is not a policy change. This is supposedly a policy clarification. They want to be a little more, I think it's good for people who have been complaining that people don't know that stuff is print on demand, because this does kind of cover that. Not that customers are going to understand that. They're not going to understand that design by means that someone designs it and then somebody else is making it. So, how effective this is going to be is questionable. But the efficiency of this is only as good as um it's how they follow through. Okay. If you have a crappy policy that you are using bots to determine whether something is handmade, and you're taking down tons of listings that you say are not handmade when they actually are, and you're leaving tons of listings up that are not handmade, but they're not being taken down, then your implementation sucks. And you can change the policy all you want, but unless you're able to enforce that policy correctly, it's still a garbage policy. Okay, so this is a step in the right direction as far as surface level appearances go, but it's the enforcement that really makes the difference. And as we know lately, Etsy has been taking down tons of handmade listings, claiming that they are not handmade because photos have been stolen from Etsy sellers and put up on these Chinese resale sites. And Etsy says, well, the photo's over here, so you must not have made it. And there's no recourse because they don't have human support that is very easily accessible. In the last 2 weeks, I know several people, and even longer than like the last couple months, there have been a lot of people who have been struggling with this because Etsy is not helpful when it comes to correcting their own mistakes. As you saw on that, I'm not going to, you guys can go look. If you want to go search for edible butterflies and just look to see all of the listings that have the exact same butterflies on them that look like the ones that I showed you that I have sourced by, okay? Look for the ones that look like that. There are lots of them that you can get on Amazon. Every single one of those people in my category have said that they make them by hand, which is a lie. And this policy change is only going to be as good as the honesty of the people who are selling on the platform. And we know that there are a lot of liars selling on Etsy right now. Okay. So I'm telling the truth. I'm saying I make these and I source these. And I'm probably just going to take those out because they're ugly, number one. And I don't sell them because they're gross. I don't think they're even printed with food coloring. I've mentioned that before. I think it's just regular ink. But the point being that it doesn't matter if you change your policy and you have all these different categories if people aren't honest about the source of how they make it. Now, I will show you one more thing, and this is the new listing manager. Like the inside the listing, it has a little more information now about when you're listing the thing. So this is inside the listing manager. Who made it? I did. What is it? A finished product. This has shown up, all this information down here. How does your shop produce this item? I would be putting it's made from scratch, okay? Because I don't assemble from purchased parts. It's not an item that my shop alters. It's not a curated set of purchased goods. Now, this I find interesting, and we'll go back to this in a minute. And it's a natural material, meaning crystals, plant shells, etc., that kind of thing. This is interesting to me because this says examples is a spa kit. My shop curates a themed assortment that includes some commercially available goods. I didn't think this was allowed on Etsy. I was not under the impression that this stuff is allowed on Etsy. I guess I'm wrong if they're putting that up as an option. I don't know. So that it could be that they're trying to find this and get rid of it. I doubt it. I think that this is now something that they have probably changed the policies about. I'm not sure. But I did not think that gift baskets were allowed. So I guess you can still get your big bag of Doritos on Etsy. I'm not sure. Okay, so we're going to have to look at that. But I would be putting it's made from scratch because I make everything that I sell. If it's something that is, let's see, if it's a finished product, if let's say another company or person, what options show up? Then when was it made to order? Production partners, you have to put the production partners. So that's nothing new. So this might just show up on the handmade stuff. I don't know. You're going to have to go into your own listing manager and kind of mess around with this to see what it is. What tools are used to make this item? Now, this is interesting. Handheld or hand-guided tools, computerized tools or machines. I would say probably a machine because I use a printer. And then I also use a knife. I use a knife to cut them out. So it would be these two. They also have AI generator. Now, I would be excited if on the listings, they suddenly have to put that there's an AI component to it. But again, this is the kind of thing that's only going to be as good as the honesty of the person who's creating the listing. I don't know. None, I don't use tools. This would fall under the natural material, like if you're selling crystals or something like that. But for my listings, it would be these two because I use a hand and a knife in my hand to cut them out. And I also use a printer to print them. So it would be those two things. I don't have production partners, and I'm just going to put apply to that. And that's what is going to be for this listing. I'm not sure if there's a way, I don't know if there's a way that I will be able to go in and do this in bulk. So this might be the kind of thing that we are expected to go in and change everything. But I would go in and start poking around in your own listings to see what's going on, because that looks like it's a change that we're going to have to start doing as we list things to correctly categorize things. I also would encourage Etsy to actually take this seriously. And maybe if you want to keep commerce human, you can put some human support for the people who your bots are taking down their handmade listings incorrectly. And maybe give them some support, because I know people whose businesses have been wrecked because of Etsy's mistakes using AI, which is not reliable, to identify what is handmade and what isn't. And keeping commerce human is really important if you're dealing with handmade and creative artisans. I would also say that in the immortal words of Nikki Sixx, and I'm going to use this today when I do my live, okay? I'm going to talk about this in my Tuesday live that I do on my other channel. In the immortal words of Nikki Sixx, you can paint a garbage can platinum, but it's still a garbage can. So unless you actually follow this up with enforcement, this policy is meaningless. And unless people actually go in and categorize things correctly and they're honest about whether they make things or not, it's pretty meaningless. It just is a little extra few steps that we have to fill out when we're listing our listings. And depending on how honest the people are listing things are, it's going to make a big difference with all the lies that are told on Etsy about whether things are handmade or not. Okay, so that's my thoughts about this. If you have your own thoughts, please post them. I don't know if this is an improvement. I don't think that it is. I think it's just a reshuffling the deck. It doesn't really change anything. It does give us some extra steps that we have to do when we are listing our listings, but that's about it. So give this video a thumbs up, leave me your comments, leave me your thoughts. And if you are watching this before my Tuesday live, I will do a live talk about this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I will see you over on my other channel.